The blizzard was 20 below when Colt Brennan heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the alley behind Coldwater's feed store. A child's cry, thin and fading, swallowed by wind that clawed at his coat and turned his breath to ice. He'd been searching for strayed cattle, found something worse. The dumpster lid groaned open, frozen metal burning his palms. Inside, half buried in snow, a little girl, maybe 7, bound wrist and ankle with rusted barbed wire. Her lips were blue, her eyes blinked slow, like a candle running out of wick. Colt tore off his gloves, snapped the wire with his pocket knife. Blood welled where the barbs had bitten deep. She clutched something in her fist, a scrap of paper, torn and smudged. When he lifted her, she weighed nothing, just cold and bones and fear. Her whisper cut through the wind. He said Mama's dead. Is she? Then her eyes rolled back and the world went silent except for the storm. Colt ran. His boots punched through drifts, the girl limp against his chest. The wind screamed. 2 miles to the ranch. No time for the wagon, no time for help. Just him and the blizzard and a child who'd stopped shivering. That was bad. He knew that much. His breath came hard, each inhale like swallowing glass. The wire had cut her deep, thin lines of blood soaked into his shirt, freezing black against the wool. Her head lolled with each step. He pressed her closer, trying to fold his body around hers, trying to give her whatever warmth he had left. The snow erased the road. He followed the fence line by memory, counting posts. 16, 20, 32. His ranch house appeared through the white, a dim yellow glow from the window he'd left burning. He kicked the door open, stumbled inside. The heat hit him like a fist. "Stay with me," he muttered, laying her on the rug by the fire. Her skin was wax pale, her lips purple at the edges. He stripped off her wet dress, wrapped her in every blanket he owned. The fire snapped and hissed, smoke mixed with the smell of melting snow and old coffee grounds. He rubbed her hands between his palms. Nothing. Rubbed harder. Her fingers stayed limp. Colt pressed 2 fingers to her neck. There, faint, fluttering. A pulse like a moth caught in a jar. He grabbed the whiskey bottle from the shelf, poured a capful, forced it between her lips. She coughed once, weak, but it was something. He wrapped her tighter, pulled her onto his lap, held her like he used to hold his boy when the fevers came. The wire marks circled her wrists like bracelets. Whoever tied her knew what they were doing, tight enough to hold, loose enough she wouldn't die quick. The scrap of paper lay on the floor where it had fallen from her fist. Colt unfolded it carefully. Half a form, torn diagonal. Official seal at the top, County Assessor's Office. A name, Ruby Dalton. And below it, in neat script, guardian assigned V. Hackett. Colt's jaw tightened. Vernon Hackett, land assessor, adoption broker, the man who held half the township's debt in his back pocket. The girl's eyelids fluttered. Her lips moved. Cold. I know, sweetheart. I know. He pulled the blanket higher, tucked it under her chin. You're safe now. Her eyes opened, gray, glassy, haunted. He'll come. Who will? The man, the one who took me. Colt's chest went tight. Nobody's taking you anywhere. She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, truth maybe, or a reason to believe him. Then her eyes closed again, and she went still. He sat there holding her, watching the fire burn low, listening to the blizzard rage outside. The clock on the mantel ticked. Midnight came and went. By the time he heard the knock at the door, he'd already decided. He wasn't giving her back. Doc Marianne Holt arrived just past 2 in the morning, her medical bag slung over one shoulder, snow caked in her gray hair. She took one look at the girl and swore under her breath. How long's she been like this? 2 hours, maybe 3. Doc knelt, pressed her stethoscope to the girl's chest. Her mouth thinned. She unwrapped the blankets, examined the wire cuts, the bruises mottling her arms. Her fingers moved quick and sure, checking pupils, pulse, the bluish tint beneath her nails. Hypothermia, dehydration, malnutrition. Doc's voice was clipped, clinical. She opened her bag, pulled out bandages, carbolic acid. The sharp medicinal smell cut through the smoke. These ligature marks, they're days old, maybe a week. She's been restrained for a while. Colt's fists clenched. How long? Long enough her body tried to heal around the wire. Doc soaked a cloth in warm water, began cleaning the wounds. The girl whimpered but didn't wake. Whoever did this wanted her compliant. Weak enough she couldn't run. She had a paper, Hackett's name on it. Doc's hands paused. She looked up, her eyes hard. Vernon Hackett? You know him. Everyone knows him. She went back to wrapping the girl's wrist, her jaw tight. My husband worked his mine 10 years back. Collapse killed 15 men. Hackett paid the widows $50 each and called it settled. She tied off the bandage with a sharp tug. He doesn't do anything without profit in it. Colt watched the girl breathe, shallow but steady. She said he's coming for her. Then you better be ready. Doc stood, wiped her hands on her apron. I'll file a report with the sheriff tomorrow. Medical examination, suspected abuse. That'll buy you time. How much? Not enough. She picked up her bag, moved toward the door. Snow swirled in when she opened it. But it's a start. After she left, Colt sat in the chair by the fire, the girl curled on the rug at his feet. The torn paper lay on the table, Hackett's seal staring up at him like an eye. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled and popped. And somewhere in the dark, Colt knew Vernon Hackett was already planning his next move. The girl stirred in her sleep. "Mama," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Colt closed his eyes. He hadn't saved his own boy. Maybe he could save this one. By morning, the blizzard had died to a sullen gray sky. Colt hitched the wagon and drove into Coldwater, the girl bundled beside him in blankets. She hadn't spoken since dawn, just stared at the passing pines, eyes wide and empty. The town was a single muddy street lined with false front buildings. Esther Bright's general store sat in the middle, smoke curling from its chimney. Colt tied the horse and helped the girl down. She gripped his hand like it was the only solid thing in the world. The bell above the door jangled. Inside smelled of coffee beans, lamp oil, and the faint sweetness of dried apples in barrels. Esther stood behind the counter, a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and sharper ears. She looked up, saw the girl, and her face went still. "Colt Brennan." Her voice carried the weight of a question she hadn't asked yet. "Need supplies, bandages, soap, some milk if you have it." Esther's gaze dropped to the girl's bandaged wrist. "That's Ruby Dalton." Colt's hand tightened on the counter. "You know her?" "Know of her. Mother disappeared 3 years back. Child went into the system." Esther pulled items from the shelves, wrapping them in brown paper. Her hands moved quick, but her eyes never left the girl. "Heard she was placed with a family up in Billings?" She wasn't. Esther tied the package with string, leaned close. Her voice dropped. 3 other girls went missing after Hackett processed their papers. Nobody talks about it. She glanced toward the window, then back. But people remember. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of horse sweat and expensive cologne. Vernon Hackett stepped inside. He was tall, clean-shaven, dressed in a wool coat that cost more than most men made in a year. His eyes were the color of creek ice, pale, clear, calculating. He smiled when he saw Colt. "Mr. Brennan, didn't expect to see you in town so early." Colt turned slow. "Hackett? And this must be Ruby." Hackett's smile widened. He crouched down to the girl's level, his voice going soft, syrupy. "Hello, sweetheart. You gave us quite a scare running off like that." Ruby pressed herself against Colt's leg, trembling. Hackett straightened, his smile never wavering. "I'm her legal guardian, Mr. Brennan. Filed and notarized with the county. I've been searching for her since she wandered off 2 days ago." "Wandered off?" Colt's voice was flat. "That what you call it?" Children get confused, frightened. Hackett pulled a folded document from his coat pocket, laid it on the counter. Official stamps, signatures, legal weight. "I appreciate you finding her, but I'll take her from here." Colt didn't move. "She's staying with me." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Hackett's smile thinned. "That's not how this works." "Don't care how it works." "Then let me explain." Hackett's voice stayed pleasant, but something cold slid beneath it. "I'm the county land assessor, Mr. Brennan. I process every deed, every lien, every adoption in this territory." He tapped the document. "I have legal standing. You have sentiment." Behind the counter, Esther had gone quiet. The store felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Colt met Hackett's eyes. She had wire around her wrists, left in a dumpster in 20 below cold. "A tragic accident. She ran away during the storm, got disoriented. Wire doesn't tie itself." Hackett's jaw tightened. The pleasant mask slipped for half a heartbeat, showing something harder underneath. Then it snapped back into place. "Careful, Brennan. Accusations like that can ruin a man." He folded the document, slid it back into his pocket. "I'll give you till tomorrow to reconsider. After that, I'll return with the sheriff." He tipped his hat to Esther, ignored the girl completely, and walked out. The bell jangled behind him. Silence filled the store like water rising. Esther exhaled slow. "You just made an enemy." "Had one already, sounds like." "Not like this." She pushed the package across the counter. He owns half the men in this town. The other half owe him money. Her eyes flicked to Ruby. You keep her. He'll bury you. Let him try. Esther studied him for a long moment. Then she opened the cash drawer, pulled out $2 silver, pressed them into his hand. For the girl, whatever she needs. Esther, don't. Her voice cracked, just slightly. 3 girls, Colt. I remember their names. Nobody else does. The sheriff's office was a converted stable that still smelled of hay and manure. Sheriff Wade Kirkland sat behind a desk, scarred with knife marks and old coffee rings. He was 55, gray-bearded, with the tired eyes of a man who'd stopped believing in easy answers. Colt laid the torn paper on the desk. Found the girl last night, in a dumpster, bound with wire. Kirkland picked up the paper, studied it. His expression didn't change. Hackett came by an hour ago, said she ran off, that you're refusing to return his ward. That's one version. What's yours? Someone tied her up and left her to freeze. Kirkland set the paper down. You have proof? Wire marks on her wrists. Doc Holt's seen them. Doc's seen a lot of things. Kirkland leaned back, the chair creaking. Doesn't mean a judge will care. So that's it? He has papers? Case closed? That's how law works, Colt. Papers matter. Witnesses matter. He tapped the document. This is signed by a notary. Filed with the county. Legal as they come. Even if it's built on lies? Kirkland's face hardened. You got evidence says otherwise? Bring it. Till then, my hands are tied. He stood, opened the door. Cold air swept in. I'll tell Hackett you're cooperating. Buy you some time. But Colt, he paused. He's got the county clerk in his pocket. He wants her back. He'll get her back. Colt stepped into the street. The sky was the color of old iron. Ruby waited in the wagon, wrapped in blankets, watching him with those wide gray eyes. He climbed up beside her. You hungry? She nodded. Let's get you fed. As they rode out of town, Colt glanced back once. Hackett stood on the steps of the land office, hands in his pockets, watching them leave, smiling. Doc Holt came back 3 days later, this time with company. She knocked twice, then let herself in. That was her way. Behind her came Esther Bright, carrying a basket covered with checkered cloth. The smell of fresh bread filled the cabin. Ruby sat by the fire, wrapped in one of Colt's old shirts. She'd eaten that morning, eggs and toast, and kept it down. Progress. Doc set her bag on the table. We need to talk. Colt poured coffee, black and bitter. The 4 of them sat in a circle. Colt, Doc, Esther, and the silence between them that said this wasn't a social call. Doc spoke first. I filed my report with the sheriff. Medical examination, evidence of prolonged restraint, malnutrition, exposure. She pulled a folded paper from her coat. This is a copy, notarized. And Sheriff Kirkland's sitting on it. Colt's jaw worked. Why? Because Hackett owns him. Doc's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. Not with money, with leverage. Kirkland's daughter needed surgery 2 years back, couldn't afford it. Hackett paid the bill. She met Colt's eyes. Man doesn't forget a debt like that. Esther unwrapped the bread, set it on the table. But he's not all bad. Wade Kirkland, he's just scared. Scared men are dangerous, Colt said. Scared men can also be turned. Doc leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. The kerosene lamp flickered, throwing shadows across her lined face. My husband died in Hackett's mine. Cave-in. 1878. 15 men buried alive. Her voice stayed steady, but something cold burned underneath. Hackett blamed the foreman, paid us $50 and sealed the records, said it was an act of God. Ruby looked up from the fire. Her eyes found Doc's. It wasn't God, Doc continued. It was cheap timber and skipped inspections. I knew it, everyone knew it, but nobody had proof. She opened her bag, pulled out a small black notebook. I've been waiting 10 years for a way to make him answer. You just gave me one. Colt took the notebook. Inside, dates, names, locations, a ledger of missing children. 3 names circled in red ink. Sarah Pritchard, age 9, placed 1885, family never heard from again. Lily Chin, age 6, placed 1886. Letters stopped after 2 months. Emma Ruiz, age 8, placed 1887. Mother found dead, 3 weeks later, ruled suicide. Jesus, Colt whispered. Ruby's the 4th. Doc's eyes were hard as flint. But she's the first one who survived long enough to talk. Esther cleared her throat. There's more. I asked around, quiet-like. She pulled a scrap of paper from her apron pocket. Hackett's been buying land, lots of it. Homesteads that fail, ranches that go under, always for half what they're worth, always when the owners are desperate. What's that got to do with the girl? Everything. Esther tapped the paper. He uses the children as leverage, tells families he'll place their kids in good homes for a fee. Then he turns around and uses that same paperwork to claim guardianship. Once he's got legal standing, he can do whatever he wants. Colt looked at Ruby. She'd gone still, staring into the fire like she could see something in the flames only she understood. We need a judge, Doc said. A real one, not Kirkland. Circuit judge comes through in April, Esther said. 2 months. Ruby might not have 2 months. Colt set the notebook down. Hackett said he'd come back with the sheriff. Doc nodded slowly. Then we force his hand. Make it public. Make it loud. She looked at Ruby. Can she testify? The girl's head turned. Her voice came out small, fragile. About what? About what happened to you? Ruby's hands twisted in the shirt fabric. She looked at Colt, then back at Doc. Will it make him go away? It might. Will it bring Mama back? The question hung in the air like smoke. Doc's expression softened. I don't know, sweetheart, but it'll make sure he can't hurt anyone else. Ruby was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded once, sharp and certain. Okay. Sheriff Kirkland came the next afternoon. Alone, this time. He stood on the porch, hat in his hands, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. Doc Holt talked to me, he said. Showed me your notes. The other girls. Colt waited. I can't do much, but I can do this. Kirkland pulled a document from his coat, laid it on the porch rail. Temporary custody, 90 days. Emergency protective order, pending full investigation. Colt picked it up. Official seal, sheriff's signature. Why now? Kirkland's jaw tightened. Because my daughter asked me a question this morning. She said, You taught me right from wrong, Pa. When are you going to act like you remember? He looked past Colt toward the cabin where Ruby's shadow moved behind the window. Hackett paid for her surgery. That's true, but she's alive because of it. And she asked me what good is being alive if you're too scared to live. Hackett won't like this. No, he won't. Kirkland put his hat back on. 90 days, Colt. That's all I can give you. After that, it goes to a judge. He turned to leave, paused. But for what it's worth, I hope you win. After he left, Colt went inside. Ruby sat at the table, drawing with a piece of charcoal on brown paper. She'd sketched a house, a tree, 2 figures, one tall, one small. What's that? Colt asked. She didn't look up. Home. He sat down beside her. Outside, the wind picked up. Icicles dripped from the eaves, slow, steady, the first sign of thaw. 90 days. It wasn't much, but it was a start. 6 weeks passed. February thawed into March. The snow turned to slush, then mud. Ice cracked on the creek each morning, refroze at night. Ruby grew stronger. Color returned to her cheeks, flesh to her bones. She gathered eggs without being asked, fed the chickens, sat with Colt on the porch in the afternoons, watching the sky turn purple over the mountains. She still didn't talk much, but she was there, present, learning to trust solid ground again. Miguel Santos, Colt's ranch hand, arrived mid-March with supplies from town. He was 40, lean and weathered, with steady hands and a quiet way about him. He'd worked the ranch for 5 years, sent most of his pay back to family in Sonora. He found Ruby in the barn, brushing down the mare. She hummed while she worked, off-key, fragile, but it was sound. It was life. Miguel smiled. She likes you. Ruby looked up. The horse? See, and Colt too, I think. She went back to brushing, her small hands working the curry comb in careful circles. He doesn't smile much. No, but he didn't smile at all before you came. Miguel leaned against the stall door. You're good for him. Ruby set the brush down. Her voice came out soft, uncertain. Can I ask you something? Always. What if Mama's not really gone? Miguel went still. What makes you say that? Ruby reached into her pocket, pulled out the torn paper, the one she'd been clutching when Colt found her. She'd kept it hidden for weeks. Now she unfolded it carefully, like it might disintegrate. I heard her, Ruby whispered. The night he took me. She was crying. He said she fell down the stairs. but I heard her after, in another room, calling my name. Miguel took the paper. His face darkened. Did you tell Colt this? I was scared. What if I'm wrong? What if she's... Her voice cracked. What if I made it up? You didn't. He handed the paper back. We'll find out. I promise. That night, Ruby woke screaming. Colt ran to her room, found her thrashing in the blankets, eyes wild. He pulled her close, held her while she shook. Mama, she sobbed into his chest. He put her in the ground, but I heard her crying. He rocked her slow, the way he used to rock James when the nightmares came. You're safe. You're here. But she's not. Colt's throat tightened. He looked at Miguel, standing in the doorway, and something passed between them, an understanding that this wasn't over, that it might never be over until they found the truth. Ruby pulled back, her face wet with tears. She said my name. I know she did. Then we'll look for her, Colt said. I promise you that. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since he'd found her, she spoke a full sentence without fear trembling underneath. Mama, she whispered. Her name is Ida. Sunday came cold and gray. Colt didn't go to church often, hadn't since Martha left, but the town expected it. Appearances mattered, Doc said. Show them you're raising her right. So they went. The chapel sat at the edge of town, white clapboard with a crooked steeple. Inside smelled of old hymnals and floor wax. Colt took a seat in the back, Ruby beside him in a borrowed dress Esther had brought by. She clutched his hand the whole service, eyes fixed on the stained glass. The sermon was about forgiveness, turning the other cheek, loving thy neighbor. Colt barely heard it. After the final hymn, people filed out into the gray morning. Colt helped Ruby down the steps. Folks nodded, some smiled. A few, not many, stopped to speak. Then Sheriff Kirkland appeared at the bottom of the steps. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood Vernon Hackett, and behind Hackett, the county clerk, a thin man with spectacles and the nervous look of someone who'd been bought and knew it. Hackett smiled. Mr. Brennan, Miss Dalton, beautiful service. The crowd slowed. People lingered, sensing something. Kirkland stepped forward, his face carved from stone. He held a rolled document. Colt, I need to do this here. Public record. Colt's stomach dropped. Do what? Eviction notice. Filed yesterday. Kirkland unrolled the paper, his voice flat, official. Brennan Ranch, 400 acres. Failure to pay county property taxes. Amount due, $600, payment overdue 30 days. The air went out of the world. That's a lie, Colt said quietly. I paid in January. No record of payment. The clerk stepped forward, his voice thin and reedy. County ledger shows no transaction. Hackett's smile never wavered. It's unfortunate, but the law is clear. Unpaid taxes result in forfeiture of property. He glanced at Ruby, still holding Colt's hand. Of course, I'd be willing to settle this quietly. You return my ward, I'll make sure the ledger gets corrected. The crowd had gone silent. Esther stood near the chapel door, her face pale. Doc Holt gripped her medical bag like a weapon. And then Deacon Morris stepped forward, a fat man with a thin mustache and a voice that carried. Brother Brennan has been harboring a state ward illegally for 6 weeks. He looked around at the congregation. We are a community of law, of order. We must choose law over sentiment. A few heads nodded, not many, but enough. Kirkland's hand shook as he held out the notice. I'm sorry, Colt. Colt took the paper, read it. $600, payable in 14 days, or the land reverts to county auction. Ruby's hand tightened in his. What does it mean? It means he's trying to take our home. Hackett stepped closer. It means you have a choice to make, Mr. Brennan. The child or the land. His voice dropped, intimate and cold. Choose wisely. Half the congregation turned away, started walking to their wagons, silent, complicit. The other half stayed. Esther, Doc, Miguel, standing at the edge of the crowd, a few ranchers Colt knew from cattle sales, a handful of townswomen who wouldn't meet Hackett's eyes, not many, but not none. Colt folded the notice, tucked it into his coat. He looked at Hackett. I choose her. Hackett's smile thinned to a blade. Then you're a fool. Maybe. Colt lifted Ruby into his arms, turned toward the wagon. But I'll be a fool with a clear conscience. As they rode out of town, Ruby looked back at the crowd still gathered on the church steps, split down the middle, half with Hackett, half watching them leave. She pressed her face against Colt's shoulder. I'm sorry. For what? For making you lose your home. Colt's jaw tightened. You didn't make me lose anything. He did. He snapped the reins. And we're not done yet. But as the chapel disappeared behind them, as the mud sucked at the wagon wheels and the gray sky pressed down like a thumb, Colt felt the weight of it, the trap closing, the walls squeezing in. Hackett wasn't just taking the ranch, he was taking everything. The fence broke on a Tuesday. Colt woke to the sound of cattle lowing, wrong, panicked, too far from the barn. He pulled on his boots and coat, grabbed his rifle, and found Miguel already saddling horses in the pre-dawn dark. North pasture, Miguel said. Fence is down. They rode out under a sky the color of old pewter. The air smelled of wet earth and coming rain. Mud sucked at the horses' hooves, splashing up their legs. The fence line came into view. 20 yards of posts snapped clean through, wire tangled in the mud. Cattle had scattered, some into the pines, some toward the road. A week's work to round them up again. Colt dismounted, knelt by the nearest post. The wood was split, but not from weather. Someone had taken an axe to it. 3 clean strikes. Miguel crouched beside him. Not an accident? No. Colt stood, looked toward town. Smoke rose from Coldwater's chimneys, thin and gray. Message. They spent the morning gathering cattle, driving them back toward the barn. Ruby watched from the porch, wrapped in a blanket. When they finally rode in, she brought them coffee, bitter and black, but hot. Colt drained his cup, set it down. Stay inside today. Why? Just do it. She looked at the broken fence posts Miguel was unloading from the wagon. Her eyes went wide. He did that. We don't know. He did. Her voice was flat, certain. He always breaks things first, then he comes back to fix them. Makes you need him. Colt and Miguel exchanged a look. Ruby pulled the blanket tighter. That's how he got Mama. Our house burned. He said he could help, then she disappeared. Ruby, I'm not lying. Her chin lifted, defiant. I remember. Colt knelt in front of her. I believe you, but I need you to stay safe while we figure this out. Can you do that? She nodded slowly. Then she looked past him, toward the pile of broken posts and tangled wire. Are you going to fix it? Have to. Cattle won't stay penned otherwise. Can I help? Miguel smiled. You know how to stretch wire? No, but I can learn. They worked through the afternoon. Miguel dug new post holes while Colt cut fresh pine logs to size. Ruby carried tools, hammer, nails, the wire cutters, and held posts steady while they sank them. The rain held off, but the air stayed thick and damp. The smell of mud and green wood filled the clearing. Colt uncoiled a roll of barbed wire. The metal gleamed dully in the gray light. He hesitated, remembering the marks on Ruby's wrists, the way the wire had bitten into her skin. She noticed. It's okay. Ruby, it's just wire. She touched the coil, ran her finger along the smooth part between the barbs. It's not bad because of what it did to me. It's bad because of who used it. Colt was quiet for a moment. Then he handed her the wire cutters. Cut me 3 lengths, 8 feet each. She measured carefully, snipped clean. The sound of it, sharp, metallic, echoed across the pasture. They strung the wire between posts, stapling it tight. Miguel pulled it taut while Colt hammered. Ruby watched every step, her eyes tracking the motion. When they finished, Colt stepped back. The fence line stretched straight and strong, new posts gleaming pale against the old weathered ones. Ruby walked up to it, pressed her hand against the wire. Does it hurt less when you use it different? What do you mean? The wire. It hurt me before, but now it's keeping the cows safe. She looked up at him. Does that make it okay? Colt didn't have an answer for that, so he just nodded. Yeah, sweetheart, I think it does. Miguel coiled the leftover wire, tied it with twine. This is the same wire? From the dumpster, cleaned it, straightened it. Colt wiped his hands on his pants. Seemed wasteful to throw it away. Not wasteful, Miguel said quietly. Right. Ruby turned in a slow circle, looking at the fence, the pasture, the mountains beyond. You turned something bad into something good. Tried to. You did. She touched the wire again, this time without hesitation. Mama used to say that. God don't waste pain, he just waits for you to use it right. The 3 of them stood there, in the gray afternoon, rain starting to fall in soft drops. The fence gleamed, the cattle grazed, and for a moment it felt like maybe they could hold this small piece of peace, against whatever was coming. Then hoofbeats sounded on the road. Colt turned. A rider approached, not Hackett, but his brother, Aaron Brennan. Aaron was 2 years younger but looked older, thin where Colt was solid, bitter where Colt was quiet. He reined up 10 yards out, stared at the three of them. Aaron. Colt. Aaron's eyes flicked to Ruby, then away. Heard you had some trouble. Word travels. Always does. Aaron dismounted, walked closer. He smelled of whiskey and old tobacco. Also heard you're about to lose the ranch. Not your concern. It is when it's my inheritance you're pissing away on some charity case. Aaron's voice rose. Pa left us this place together. You got 400 acres, I got $500, and a handshake. He jabbed a finger toward Ruby. Now you're risking it all for her. Colt's jaw tightened. You got your share. What you did with it ain't my problem. I want the land, Colt. Half of it. Fair split. You sign it over, I'll help you pay Hackett's fine. No. Then you're a fool. Aaron's face twisted. And when Hackett takes this place at auction, I'll be there to buy it. Legal and clean. He swung back into the saddle. You had a choice. Remember that. He rode off, mud spraying from his horse's hooves. Miguel let out a slow breath. That's bad. Yeah. Ruby's hand found Colt's. He hates me. He hates himself. Just easier to blame you. Colt squeezed her hand. Come on. Let's get inside before the rain picks up. But as they walked back toward the cabin, Colt felt it. The walls closing in from all sides. Hackett in front, the law behind. His own brother circling like a vulture. 14 days to pay, $600 he didn't have. And a little girl whose only crime was surviving. The town boys came on a Saturday. Ruby was in the wagon beside Colt, heading back from Doc Holt's for a follow-up examination. The cuts had healed clean, Doc said. Just scars now. Proof she'd survived. They were passing the edge of town when the first rock hit. It struck the wagon bed with a hollow thunk. Colt pulled the reins. 3 boys stood in the road, 13, maybe 14, with the cruelty that comes from learning hate at home. The tallest one grinned. That's her, the stray. Ruby shrank against Colt's side. Another rock flew. This one hit the horse's flank. The mare whinnied, sidestepped. Colt held the reins tight. Go home, boys. Why? You keeping her like a pet? The tall one picked up another stone. My pa says she ain't even yours. Says you stole her from her rightful guardian. Your pa's wrong. Pa says Hackett's gonna take your land. Says you'll be begging in the street by summer. The boy wound up, threw hard. The rock caught Ruby on the shoulder. She cried out, hand flying to the spot. Something snapped in Colt's chest. He was off the wagon before he thought, crossing the distance in 3 strides. The boy stumbled back, but not fast enough. Colt grabbed him by the collar, lifted him onto his toes. You ever throw a rock at a child again, Colt said quietly. I'll make sure you regret it till you're old enough to die of shame. Understood? The boy's face went white. He nodded. Colt released him. The kid scrambled backward, tripped, fell in the mud. His friends were already running, but the damage was done. A crowd had gathered, shopkeepers in doorways, women with baskets. The deacon, watching from across the street with his arms folded and a satisfied look on his face. Miguel appeared from the alley, breathing hard. He'd been buying supplies at the feed store. Now he stood between Colt and the boys, fists clenched. Back away, Miguel said to the crowd. This is done. But the tall boy pointed at Miguel. He grabbed me first. That Mexican grabbed me. It was a lie. Everyone had seen Colt move first. But lies don't need truth when fear runs the room. Sheriff Kirkland pushed through the crowd, his face grim. He looked at Miguel, then at Colt, then at the boy still sitting in the mud. Miguel Santos, Kirkland said quietly, I'm placing you under arrest for assault. Miguel's jaw tightened. I didn't touch him. 3 witnesses say otherwise. Kirkland pulled out iron cuffs. Don't make this harder. Colt stepped forward. It was me. I'm the one. No. Miguel met his eyes, shook his head once. You have 14 days. You can't afford a night in jail. He held out his wrists. The cuffs clicked shut. Ruby watched from the wagon, tears streaming down her face. Kirkland led Miguel away. The crowd dispersed, murmuring. The deacon smiled. And, across the street, in the window of the land office, Vernon Hackett stood watching. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. That night, Esther Bright and Doc Holt arrived at the ranch together. They didn't knock, just walked in, set a lantern on the table, and spread papers across the surface like battle plans. We're done waiting, Doc said. Colt sat across from them, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Ruby was asleep upstairs, finally, after crying herself out. Esther opened a flour sack, dumped its contents onto the table. Papers, old ledgers, receipts. I've been collecting these for 3 years. Every transaction Hackett's touched. Every family he's ruined. She tapped a yellow deed. This one's from the Morrison homestead. Burned down in '86. Hackett bought it for $50. Worth $500 easy. Doc added another stack. Medical records. 3 children admitted to my care over 4 years. All under Hackett's guardianship. All with ligature marks. All placed out of territory within the 2 weeks of arrival. Colt stared at the papers. Where'd you get these? His office. Tonight. Doc's smile was knife-thin. Esther kept the clerk busy while I picked the lock. You broke in? I prefer retrieved evidence. Doc pulled out a large green ledger, laid it open. The pages were filled with names, dates, amounts. This is his placement book. 14 children over 6 years. Everyone listed as orphan or abandoned. But look here. She pointed to an entry dated 1885. Sarah Pritchard, mother, deceased. Except Sarah's mother didn't die until '87. I signed the death certificate myself. Colt leaned closer. The handwriting was neat, methodical. Each entry included a name, a payment amount, and a destination. Most were out of territory. 2 were marked simply, placed, no record. What does that mean? Doc's face darkened. It means he stopped keeping track. Esther turned the page. There, halfway down. Ruby Dalton, age 7, mother, deceased, guardian assigned, V. Hackett, placement fee, $800, but someone had crossed out deceased in faint pencil. Above it, in different ink, committed, Deer Lodge Sanitarium. Colt's heart stopped. Committed? Her mother's alive. Doc tapped the entry. Or was, 3 months ago. Hackett had her declared mentally unfit, locked away. Then he claimed guardianship of Ruby and sold her to a family in Oregon. Jesus Christ. She never made it to Oregon. Esther's voice was quiet. Someone decided she was too much trouble, so they dumped her. The 3 of them sat in silence. The lamp flickered. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Colt closed the ledger. This is evidence. It's more than evidence. Doc met his eyes. It's 14 families who never got justice. It's proof he's been trafficking children through legal loopholes for 6 years, and it's your way out. How? We take it to the circuit judge. He arrives April 10th, 3 weeks. I've got 8 days before Hackett auctions the ranch. Then we don't let him auction it. Esther pulled out a small cloth purse, poured coins onto the table. That's $200 from 11 families in town, anonymous donations. Colt stared at the money. I can't. You can, and you will. Esther's voice was steel. Because this isn't about you anymore, Colt Brennan. It's about every child he's taken, every family he's destroyed. She pushed the coins toward him. You pay the fine. You keep the ranch, and you hold that girl safe until the judge arrives. Doc added quietly, then we bury him. Colt looked at the ledger, at the names, at Ruby's entry with the crossed-out lie. Her mother's alive? If she survived Deer Lodge. Doc's expression softened. It's not a kind place, but there's a chance. Colt's hands shook as he reached for the ledger. Can you find her? I'll leave tomorrow. And Miguel? I'll post his bail tonight. Esther stood, brushed flour dust from her skirt. But Colt, Hackett knows we're moving. This arrest wasn't random. He's tightening the noose. Let him try. Doc gathered the papers, tucked them into her medical bag. 3 weeks, then we end this. After they left, Colt sat alone in the lamplight, the ledger open in front of him. He turned to Ruby's page, traced the penciled correction with his finger. Committed, Deer Lodge Sanitarium. Not dead, alive. Somewhere in the dark, a woman was locked away, believing her daughter had drowned, and that daughter slept upstairs, believing her mother was gone. Colt closed the ledger gently, like it was something sacred. 3 weeks, he whispered to the empty room. Hold on, 3 more weeks. The door to James's room had been locked for 3 years. Colt stood in front of it now, hand on the knob, frozen. The hallway smelled of old coffee and wood smoke. Rain drummed on the roof, steady, relentless, the kind that soaked into your bones. He hadn't meant to come here. Had been looking for a blanket for Ruby. Found himself standing in this hallway instead, staring at a door that hadn't opened since Martha left. The knob turned under his hand. Someone had unlocked it. He pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the room was exactly as James had left it. Bed made tight, Wooden soldiers lined up on the shelf, a small carved horse on the windowsill, painted brown with a white star on its forehead. Ruby sat in the rocking chair by the window. She looked up when he entered, her face pale in the gray light. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay." The door was locked, but I found a key in the kitchen drawer. She touched the chair's armrest. "I just wanted to see." Colt stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under his weight. Everything was dusty. 3 years of grief settled like snow over toy soldiers and picture books. He sat on the bed. The mattress sagged under him, springs groaning. Ruby rocked slowly, the chair creaking in rhythm with the rain. How old was he? 9? What happened? Scarlet fever. Winter of '85. Colt's voice came out flat, worn smooth by repetition. He was fine in the morning. By evening, he couldn't breathe. By midnight, he was gone. Ruby was quiet for a long moment, then, "Do you miss him?" "Every day." "Me too." She looked at him, eyes solemn. I miss my mama. Every day, even when I'm happy, even when I'm safe." Her voice wavered. "Is that okay?" Colt's throat tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart, that's okay." She went back to rocking. "Your wife left because he died?" "She left because I didn't. I don't understand. She wanted me to hurt the way she did, cry the way she did, but I couldn't." He picked up the carved horse from the windowsill, turned it over in his hands. "I just stopped feeling anything. Locked this room and pretended if I didn't look at it, it wouldn't be real." "But it was real." "Yeah." Ruby climbed down from the chair, walked to the bed. She sat beside him, small and solemn, her bare feet dangling. "You miss your boy. I miss my mama." She leaned against his shoulder. "We can miss together." Something broke open in Colt's chest, something that had been locked tight for 3 years. He set the horse down carefully, and for the first time since James died, he wept. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that ran down his face and dripped onto his hands. Ruby didn't say anything, just pressed closer, her small hand finding his. They sat like that while the rain fell and the room filled with shadows. 2 people mourning different losses but carrying the same weight. Finally, Ruby whispered, "If we find Mama, and she's okay, will you still want me?" "Always. Even if I go live with her." Colt wiped his eyes, looked down at her. "Even then, you'll always have a place here, Ruby, long as I'm breathing." She nodded slowly, then picked up the carved horse. "Can I keep this?" "It's yours." She held it to her chest, protective and reverent. "I'll take good care of it. I know you will." Outside, the rain slowed. The clouds broke apart, letting through pale stripes of late afternoon sun. The room didn't feel so heavy anymore. Still sad, still full of ghosts, but not suffocating. Ruby slid off the bed, walked to the door. "You should keep this open." "Why?" "Because locked doors just make the hurt stay trapped." She looked back at him, wise beyond 7 years. Better to let it breathe. After she left, Colt sat in the quiet room, holding the space James used to fill. The toy soldiers watched from their shelf. The bed waited, empty and patient. He stood slowly, walked to the window. The sun broke through the clouds, painting the mountains gold. The fields beyond the barn were turning green, first grass of spring pushing through mud. 3 years he'd kept this door locked. Maybe it was time to let the light in. Miguel rode up at dusk, soaked to the bone. He'd been gone 2 days, east toward the state capital, riding hard. Colt met him at the barn. "You find him?" "See." Miguel dismounted, his legs shaky. His horse was lathered, trembling. "Circuit Judge Harrison. He's in Helena, finishing a trial." "When's he coming through Coldwater?" "April 10th, 8 days." Miguel pulled an envelope from his saddlebag, handed it to Colt. I explained the situation. He agreed to move up the hearing, emergency session, public trial. Colt opened the envelope. Inside, an official letter. Emergency custody hearing, Ruby Dalton, April 10th, 1888. 10:00 a.m., Coldwater Township. All evidence to be presented for review. Judge Marcus Harrison, presiding. "He's coming." "He's coming." Miguel leaned against the barn wall, breathing hard. "But Colt, Hackett knows. His men tried to stop me on the road. I had to lose them in the timber." "You hurt?" "No, just tired." Miguel's eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with exhaustion. "But he knows we have the ledger, and he's going to move before the judge arrives." As if summoned by the words, a figure emerged from the tree line. Not Hackett, His clerk, the thin man with spectacles, moving fast and nervous. He stopped 20 yards out, hands raised. "Don't shoot, I'm not here to fight." Colt stepped out of the barn, rifle loose in his hands. "Then why are you here?" "Because Hackett's planning something." The clerk's voice shook. "Tonight, he's going to burn evidence, the land office, everything that ties him to those children." "Why tell me?" The clerk's face crumpled. "Because my daughter's name is in that ledger. Emily Watts, disappeared 4 years ago. I thought she ran away." His voice broke. "I helped him. God forgive me, I helped him, and I didn't know." Miguel moved closer. "Where is he now?" "Still in town, meeting with the deacon and your brother, planning the auction for your land." The clerk wiped his eyes. "But he'll move tonight, midnight. He'll burn the office and claim it was an accident." Colt's jaw tightened. "How much time do we have?" 4 hours? Maybe 5? The clerk backed toward the trees. "I can't be seen here, but I'll testify. When the judge comes, I'll tell him everything." He disappeared into the shadows. Miguel looked at Colt. "What do we do?" Colt stared toward town, where smoke rose from 100 chimneys and Hackett plotted in the dark. 8 days until the judge, 4 hours until Hackett destroyed the evidence. He turned back to Miguel. "Get Doc and Esther, bring them here, and find Sheriff Kirkland." His voice was hard, final. "Tell him if he wants his conscience clear, tonight's his last chance." Miguel nodded and swung back into the saddle, exhausted horse or not. Colt walked to the house. Ruby sat at the window, watching the last light fade over the mountains. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about?" "You're lying." She turned to face him. "He's coming, isn't he?" Colt crouched beside her chair. "Not here, but yes, he's making a move." "Are you going to stop him?" "I'm going to try." She took his hand. "Don't let him burn it. Whatever he wants to burn. Don't let him." "I won't." She squeezed his fingers. "Promise?" "Promise." Outside, the stars came out one by one. The rain stopped. The wind died. And in Coldwater, Vernon Hackett lit a lamp in his office and began sorting papers into piles, some to keep, some to feed to the fire. 4 hours until midnight, 8 days until justice. The clock was ticking. The branding fire burned bright against the April dawn. Colt had built it himself, starting at 5 in the morning, stacked pine and cedar in the center of the pasture where everyone could see. Lit it with kerosene and a match. The flames rose 10 feet high, crackling and spitting sparks into the pale sky. By 7, people started arriving, not all of Coldwater, not even half, but enough. Families in wagons, ranchers on horseback, Esther Bright with her grown sons, Doc Holt with her medical bag and a face carved from granite, Miguel, still sore from his ride but standing tall beside the fire. Sheriff Kirkland came at 8, alone. He dismounted slowly, walked to where Colt stood. His badge caught the firelight. "Doc says you have evidence." "I do." "Enough to warrant an emergency hearing?" "More than enough." Kirkland looked at the gathering crowd, then back at Colt. "Judge Harrison arrives at 10. I'll keep order till then." He paused. "But Colt, if Hackett shows up with papers, with lawyers, with anything official—" "He won't." "You sound sure." "I am." Because at midnight, while Hackett prepared to burn his office, Doc Holt and the county clerk had been waiting. They'd taken every ledger, every record, every scrap of evidence and moved it to Doc's home. By the time Hackett arrived with his torch, the office was empty. He'd burned nothing but furniture and his own pride. At 9:30, a black carriage rolled up the road. Judge Marcus Harrison stepped out, a man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much corruption to be surprised by more. He wore his robes already, black wool that smelled of old courtrooms and pipe smoke. He surveyed the scene, the fire, the crowd, the tension thick enough to taste. "Mr. Brennan?" Colt stepped forward. "Your Honor." "You called for an emergency hearing." "I did." "Then let's not waste time." Harrison gestured to the fire. "This will do as a courthouse." The crowd formed a circle, families on one side, empty space on the other, waiting. At exactly 10 o'clock, Vernon Hackett arrived. He came in a hired carriage, flanked by 2 men in suits, lawyers from Helena, by the look of them. He stepped out calm, composed, dressed in his finest coat. His eyes found Colt across the fire, and he smiled. Behind him, another figure emerged from the carriage. Aaron Brennan, Colt's brother, walked to Hackett's side, his face hard and set. He didn't look at Colt, didn't acknowledge him at all. Judge Harrison stood by the fire, hands clasped behind his back. This is a hearing on the custody of Ruby Dalton, age 7, and the business practices of Vernon Hackett, County Land Assessor. All parties present? Present, Your Honor. One of Hackett's lawyers stepped forward. And I must object to these proceedings. This is highly irregular. I'll decide what's irregular. Harrison's voice cut like a blade. Sit down. The lawyer sat. Harrison turned to Colt. You brought charges. Present your evidence. Doc Holt stepped forward, carrying the green ledger. She laid it on a makeshift table. 2 barrels and a plank. 14 children over 6 years, all processed through Mr. Hackett's office, all listed as orphans or abandoned. She opened the ledger, turned it so the judge could see, except they weren't. Harrison leaned closer, reading. Doc continued. Sarah Pritchard, mother listed as deceased in 1885, but her mother didn't die until 1887. I have the death certificate. She pulled it from her bag, laid it beside the ledger. Lily Chen, placed out of territory in 1886, her family received 3 letters, then nothing. I have those letters. They end with, please come get me. Emma Ruiz, mother found dead 3 weeks after placement, ruled suicide. But the coroner's report, she pulled another paper, shows bruising consistent with strangulation. The crowd murmured, low, angry. Harrison's face remained impassive. Continue. Doc turned the page. Ruby Dalton, mother listed as deceased, but she's not dead. She's in Deer Lodge Sanitarium, committed under false pretenses by Mr. Hackett 3 months ago. Hackett's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. This is hearsay. It's documented. Doc pulled a telegram from her bag. This arrived yesterday. Raymond Hollis, director of Deer Lodge. Patient Ida Dalton admitted November 1887, under court order signed by Assessor Vernon Hackett. Diagnosis, acute mania, no family contact permitted. Except Ida Dalton wasn't manic. She was fighting to keep her daughter. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Harrison raised a hand. Silence fell. Where is Ida Dalton now? On her way here. Doc met his eyes. She'll arrive by noon. Hackett stood slowly. His composure cracked at the edges, just slightly. Your Honor, this is a conspiracy. These documents are... Shut up. Harrison's voice was quiet, lethal. You'll have your turn. He gestured to Colt. Call your next witness. The county clerk stepped forward. Small, nervous, but his voice held. My name is Thomas Watts. I've worked for Mr. Hackett for 6 years. I falsified records, notarized fake documents, helped process adoptions that were really sales. His voice broke. My daughter's in that ledger, Emily. I didn't know until 3 days ago. I thought she ran away. Tears streamed down his face, but he kept talking. He pays the deacon, pays the sheriff's debts, owns half the town through loans and leverage. Anyone who questions him loses their land, their business, their family. He looked at Hackett. I'm done being scared. Harrison wrote notes on a small pad. Anyone else? Esther stepped forward. I have receipts. Every family he's bought land from, always half value, always when they were desperate. She poured papers onto the table. 43 properties in 6 years? Miguel added, I have testimony from 3 ranch hands. They saw him threaten families, burn barns when people refused his offers. Sheriff Kirkland, standing at the edge of the circle, finally spoke. He paid my daughter's medical bills. $500. I've been in his pocket ever since. His voice was thick with shame. But I'm done. I'll testify to everything I've ignored. The circle of witnesses grew. One by one, people stepped forward, a mother whose son vanished, a rancher who lost his land, a widow whose husband died in Hackett's mine. The fire burned higher. The sun climbed. The weight of 6 years of silence broke open like a dam. Hackett's lawyers tried to object, to deflect, to argue procedure. Harrison silenced them each time. Finally, the judge turned to Hackett. Your defense? Hackett stood. His face was pale, but his voice stayed smooth. These are lies. Fabrications by people who owe me money and want revenge. He gestured to the ledger. That book was stolen from my office. Any court would rule it inadmissible. This isn't any court. Harrison's eyes were ice. This is Montana territory, and I have jurisdiction to seize evidence in cases of suspected trafficking. He picked up the ledger. Which this is. Hackett's composure finally shattered. You can't. I can, and I am. Harrison turned to Kirkland. Arrest him. The sheriff moved forward, pulling iron cuffs from his belt. Hackett backed toward his carriage. You have no proof, no witnesses that matter. These are nobodies. I matter. The voice came from the road. Everyone turned. A woman stood there, thin and pale, leaning on a walking stick. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, her face gaunt, but her eyes were clear and burning. Beside her, holding her arm, was Ruby. The girl had slipped away from the crowd, run down the road to meet the wagon Doc had sent. Now she stood beside her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mama," Ruby whispered. Ida Dalton looked at her daughter, then at Hackett, then at the judge. "My name is Ida Dalton," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "And I have proof." Ida walked slowly to the fire, Ruby clutching her hand. The crowd parted. Silence fell so complete you could hear the pine logs crackling. She faced Judge Harrison. "He came to my home 3 months ago, said my daughter had drowned in the creek, showed me a death certificate." Her voice cracked. "I didn't believe him. I heard her crying in his wagon. When I tried to stop him, he had me committed." She pulled a folded paper from her coat. "This is the court order, signed by him, false diagnosis, no examination. He locked me away so he could sell my child." Harrison took the paper, read it. His jaw tightened. Ida turned to face Hackett. "I heard her every night, in my cell, calling for me, and I couldn't answer." Ruby buried her face in her mother's skirt, sobbing. Hackett's face was white. "She's insane. The diagnosis was legitimate." "Then explain this." Aaron Brennan stepped forward. Every head turned. Aaron pulled a worn envelope from his coat. "I've had this for 3 years. Original survey maps of Brennan land. Pa gave them to me before he died." He looked at Colt for the first time, his face full of shame and something harder to name. "Hackett offered me $2,000 for them last week, said with these he could prove Colt's deed was fraudulent, take the ranch legal." He handed the envelope to Harrison. "But my wife asked me a question this morning. She said, what kind of man sells his brother to a devil?" His voice broke. "I don't know, but I ain't gonna be that man." Harrison opened the envelope, examined the maps. He looked at the earlier eviction notice, then back at the maps. "These prove clear ownership. The tax lien was fabricated." He turned to Hackett. "You forged county documents, falsified medical records, trafficked children through legal manipulation." His voice dropped, cold and final. "You're under arrest for fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy, and God help you, because I won't." Kirkland snapped the cuffs on Hackett's wrists. The sound echoed across the pasture. Hackett's voice rose, desperate. "You can't do this. I have rights. I have lawyers. You have nothing." Harrison closed the ledger. "Your assets are seized pending trial. Your office is dissolved. And every family you've destroyed will have their day in court." 2 of Kirkland's deputies hauled Hackett toward a wagon. He screamed, twisted, fought, but the iron held. As they dragged him past the fire, he locked eyes with Colt. "This isn't over." Colt said nothing, just stood there, Ruby and Ida beside him, and watched Hackett disappear down the road. When the wagon was gone, Harrison turned to Ruby. "Miss Dalton, your mother is here. Your guardian, your real guardian, has been removed." He knelt to her level. "Where do you want to stay?" Ruby looked at her mother, then at Colt, then back at the judge. "Can I stay with both?" Harrison smiled, the first time all morning. "I think that can be arranged." He stood, addressed the crowd. "Temporary custody granted to Ida Dalton, with residence permitted at Brennan Ranch during her recovery. Full hearing in 60 days to finalize arrangements." He looked at Colt. "Acceptable?" "Yes, Your Honor." Ruby turned to Colt, her face shining. "Can Mama live here too?" "Reckon we got room." Ida's hand found Colt's. "Thank you," she whispered, "for keeping her safe." "She kept me safe too." The fire burned low. The crowd began to disperse, slowly, reluctantly, as if leaving would break the spell. Aaron approached, hat in his hands. "Colt, Later." Colt's voice wasn't angry, just tired. "We'll talk. But later." Aaron nodded, walked away. Doc Holt packed up the ledger, her face soft with something like peace. Miguel stood with his arms crossed, watching the road where Hackett had vanished. And in the center of it all, Ruby held the branding iron, cold now, safe, and pressed it to a new pine post Miguel had set in the ground. The mark burned clean. Brennan family, not blood, choice. The trial came in late April, held in Helena with a jury of 12, in a courtroom packed so full people stood in the aisles Colt didn't attend, Didn't need to. Doc Holt went, carried the ledger and 3 years of carefully collected evidence. The county clerk testified. Ida Dalton testified. 14 families testified. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes, guilty on all counts. Vernon Hackett was sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. His assets, land, money, documents, were seized and distributed back to the families he'd ruined. The children's names were entered into official record, their stories preserved. 3 were found alive, returned to families who'd thought them lost. 11 were never found. Their names were carved into a stone memorial outside the Coldwater Church. Doc Holt paid for it herself. Esther planted flowers around the base every spring. Sarah Pritchard, Lily Chin, Emma Ruiz, and 8 others whose stories ended in silence. Ruby visited the memorial once, placed wildflowers at its base, and whispered, "I'm sorry I'm the one who made it home." Colt told her it wasn't her fault. She didn't believe him yet, but maybe someday she would. 6 weeks after the trial, the ranch looked different. Not the buildings, those were the same, but the air felt lighter. The door to James's room stayed open. Sunlight poured through windows Colt had scrubbed clean. Ida had hung curtains, blue ones, stitched by hand during her slow recovery. She was stronger now. The hollow look had left her eyes. She moved through the house like someone remembering how to be alive. Careful, tentative, but there. Ruby followed her everywhere, helping with laundry, learning to bake bread, sitting beside her on the porch in the evenings, heads bent together, talking in soft voices about things Colt didn't need to hear. He gave them space. Worked the ranch with Miguel, repaired fences, branded the spring calves, started rebuilding the barn that had been damaged in the winter storms. Aaron came by twice. The first time he stood in the yard for 20 minutes before getting the courage to knock. Colt let him in. They drank coffee in silence. Then Aaron said, "I'm sorry." And Colt said, "I know." And that was enough for now. The second time, Aaron brought his wife and 2 young sons. Ruby taught them how to feed chickens. The boys laughed when the rooster chased them. Aaron smiled, a real smile, not the bitter thing Colt had seen for years. Maybe they'd never be close. But they were brothers again. That was something. On a Sunday in May, Doc Holt came for dinner. Esther came too, bringing a pie. Miguel's wife and children arrived in a wagon, the smallest boy riding on his father's shoulders. Sheriff Kirkland showed up last, looking uncomfortable in clean clothes, a bottle of whiskey tucked under his arm. They gathered around the table Colt had built years ago, big enough for 8. Though it had sat mostly empty for 3 years, now it was full. Ruby sat between her mother and Colt, chattering about the baby goats Miguel's boys had shown her. Ida laughed, a sound like water returning to a dry creek. Doc and Esther argued good-naturedly about the best way to treat colic. Kirkland told a story about a horse thief that had everyone howling. For a moment, Colt just watched, listened to the voices layered over each other, the clatter of forks on plates, the warmth of people who'd chosen to show up. Chosen family, that's what Doc called it once. Not blood, not obligation, just people who'd walked through a blizzard together and decided to stay. After dinner, Ruby pulled Colt outside. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink. The fields were green now, thick with new grass. Cattle grazed in the distance, their bells soft and rhythmic. "Look," Ruby said, pointing to the fence line. The new posts stood straight and strong. The barbed wire gleamed in the last light. Not cruel anymore, just protective, keeping the herd safe, marking the boundary between what was theirs and what wasn't. She held up the carved wooden horse, James's horse, the one Colt had given her months ago. "Can we put this somewhere?" "Where?" "By his grave, so he knows he's not forgotten." Colt's throat tightened. "You sure?" "Yeah." She turned the horse over in her hands. "He gave it to you? You gave it to me. Now I'm giving it back to him. That's how family works, right? You pass things on." They walked to the small cemetery behind the barn. 3 graves. Colt's parents and James. Ruby knelt, placed the horse at the base of James's stone, arranged wildflowers around it. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Ruby. I'm living in your house now. Your papa's teaching me how to ride. I hope that's okay." She stood, brushed dirt from her knees. "Do you think he minds?" "No," Colt said. "I think he'd be glad." Ruby took his hand. "Me too." They walked back toward the house. Through the windows, Colt could see the others. Doc gesturing wildly, Esther laughing, Ida smiling over her coffee, Miguel's boys chasing each other around the table. Light and life and noise. Everything he'd thought he'd lost. Everything he'd been too afraid to hope for again. Ruby squeezed his hand. "Papa Colt?" The name still surprised him every time. Yeah? Are we going to be okay? He looked down at her, this small, fierce girl who'd survived wire and cold and cruelty, who'd taught him that broken things could still hold love. Yes, sweetheart, he said. I think we are. They stepped onto the porch together. Inside, someone called for more pie. Laughter rose like smoke. And for the first time in 3 years, Colt Brennan walked into a room full of people and felt like he'd come home. Now, I reckon some folks wonder if saving one child matters when the world's full of Hacketts waiting in the shadows. I used to wonder that myself. Used to think the world was too big, too broken, too far gone for one man to make a difference. Then a blizzard brought me a little girl wrapped in wire and terror, and I learned something I should have known all along. Evil don't win because it's strong, it wins because good men look away. I looked away once, locked a door, and pretended grief would fade if I just ignored it long enough. Told myself I was protecting what was left of my heart. Truth is, I was just letting it die slow. Ruby didn't need a perfect man. She needed one who wouldn't look away. One who'd walk through 20 below cold and risk everything he had left because some things matter more than safety. Family ain't who you're born to. It's who you'd walk through a blizzard for. 6 months after that April morning, I stood on my porch watching Ruby and Ida hang laundry in the yard. The sun was warm, the grass was green, the fence I'd built with wire that once Cutter held strong and true. Miguel's children played in the barn. Doc's wagon came up the road for Sunday dinner. Esther brought bread. Kirkland brought stories. Aaron brought his boys and something like peace in his eyes. My house, once a tomb of silence, was full again. Not with the family I lost, with the one I chose, the one that chose me back. James's wooden horse sits on his grave now, weathered by rain and sun. Sometimes Ruby leaves fresh flowers there. Sometimes she just sits and talks to him, telling him about her day. I think he'd like that. I think he'd like her. The door to his room stays open, light pours through, and some mornings I walk past it and remember. Not with pain, but with something gentler, gratitude. Because some blessings come wrapped in barbed wire, just to see if you're brave enough to hold them. And I was. God help me, I was.